Reggie Barlow left the DC Defenders to be the Tennessee State head coach, and he's going to bring a few of his critical coaching staff members with him when he makes the move. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada team of the week later in the episode. We'll wrap up today's episode by looking at the exodus of HBCU coaches. Yes, it's not just the players. The coaches are departing as well. In segment 2, Charlotte versus Baltimore. Who's going to get the CIAA tournament and why I think that this competition is phenomenal. But we kick this whole thing off with Reggie Barlow, who I know was a shocking hire. I did not expect for them to get a hire of this magnitude, this quickly, this late in the game. But with Reggie Barlow, also comes his coaching staff from the DC Defenders. I didn't know who was going to join, who was going to stay, because you have to understand this is a professional head coaching, or excuse me, a professional coaching gig. So for them to make the move to Tennessee State, I think that all of these hires are big, but there's not a hire with more weight than Greg Williams. So Greg Williams, y'all see it behind me. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but he was the he was the defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints at a period of time. And I'm going to tell you right now, the calling card of Greg Williams is his ability to send pressure. Not even his ability, his propensity to send pressure. That's the better part to say it. Better way to say it. Greg Williams is going to put so much stress on the quarterbacks of the Big South OVC. Now, I've been trying to weigh this with myself, and I don't think I have an answer. I don't think I'll have an answer until August rolls around. But I always wondered, he was great at getting pressure on professional quarterbacks, so I would assume he would have an even greater impact on college quarterbacks. But at the same time, he's going to be dealing with less talented pass rushers than he did in the NFL. So things might be different. I don't know how much scheme went into why he was able to get so much pressure, how much actual players went into how much he was able to get pressure, but it'll be something that's interesting to watch because when you look at Greg Williams, you expect him to be a guy who is going to heat up the quarterback. He's going to send multiple blitzers. He's going to find a way to get to the QB. And I don't think that that's something that you see consistently impacting college quarterbacks. They're just always under pressure. You have a few teams here and there, and Tennessee State is going to be a part of the few teams that are heavily pressuring the QB. So yeah, Greg Williams is without a doubt the biggest name that's on here because he's the one that everybody knows. No disrespect to anybody else, but Greg Williams has been a professional coach for 30 years. He's been a professional coach since the 90s. And he actually, along with a lot of these guys, one thing about this is Reggie Barlow is bringing a bunch of coaches who were with him with the DC Defenders, but he's also bringing a bunch of coaches who they have history in Tennessee, specifically Nashville, if not Tennessee State. You actually look at the other three coaches I'm going to highlight, most of them way briefer than this, but outside of Greg Williams, they all went to Tennessee State, or they all been at Tennessee State. Greg Williams, you may not know, but Greg Williams was actually with the Titans when they made that move from Houston. So when they were the Houston Oilers to being in Tennessee, Greg Williams was a part of that transition. So that's just something to put out there. Also, Frank Case. No, actually, let's get to Frank Case second. I want to highlight Shannon Harris because he's somebody who I actually don't know if is going to join. So Shannon Harris has been announced that he's going to join. He's going to be an offensive coordinator for Tennessee State. But he's also the interim head coach with the DC Defenders. Now, this is where things get interesting. Shannon Harris is where things get really interesting for Reggie Barlow's coaching staff because Shannon Harris is a guy who's been with him for a while. So I know he wanted to bring him along to Tennessee State, and I knew Harris would say, yeah. But Harris is also taking over for Barlow as the interim head coach with the DC Defenders. What happens if they have another great season? Mind you, in 2023, they made it all the way to the championship game. If the DC Defenders have another great season, I could imagine that they will push to get Shannon Harris as the permanent head coach. And I would assume that he would probably take that because that is a higher position. I would assume he would stay as the head coach of the DC Defenders opposed to being the Tennessee State offensive coordinator. Now, if he stays as the Defenders head coach, what happens with some of these other guys? Especially a guy like Russ Aaronfield. That's the one that really gets me because he's an offensive line coach who you could easily bump up to offensive coordinator. Now, he has another positional upgrade, and he doesn't feel the need to go to Tennessee State. I don't think Frank Case stays. He's an offensive coordinator and an offensive-minded head coach. That's not really necessary, so it makes sense you just go ahead and you go somewhere else. Go ahead and go to Tennessee State. Greg Williams, he's on the fence because some of these guys are probably making this move because we don't know what the next regime is going to want to do. But if the next regime is a guy like Reggie, or excuse me, like Shannon Harris, that may change some conversations. That may change some conversation. So that's just something I thought about. Just something that I thought about. But let's get back to Shannon Harris because I want to highlight him independent of that as well. He's Tennessee State through and through, and a lot of these guys are, but he's through and through. Played at Tennessee State, was the quarterback, was a Walter Payton finalist, was the team MVP. You look at his LinkedIn, and he is credited as being the offensive coordinator, which is interesting to me because now I feel like is Reggie Barlow going to have co-offensive coordinators? With the DC Defenders, he was not the OC. He was not the OC on that team. He was listed as the quarterback's coach. He was listed as the quarterback's coach. Now, a lot of times when you have co-offensive coordinators, they'll get a position as well. So it's almost like we're both going to lead the offense. We're both going to come up with game planning. Only one of us can call the play, but we're both going to come up with a lot of the critical aspects of being an offensive coordinator. But in meetings, we're going to isolate on our players a little bit more, right? So like if I'm the quarterback's coach, I'm gonna help lead the offensive meetings, but I'll probably focus on the coaches, on the quarterbacks a little bit more. But yeah, so Russ Aaronfield, he's a guy who he had four. This is probably the most interesting one. I'll say this because you got Shannon Harris, you got Greg Williams. Those are like the big ones to me. But then you look at the underrated hiring, and that's Russ Aaronfield. He's a guy who's been at Tennessee State. I think this is his fourth time now. I think he's been there multiple instances, and I think he's been with Fred Case most of them. But Aaronfield is a guy who he had 4 offensive linemen drafted in 2024, or excuse me, 2014 and 2015. So between those 2 seasons, he had 2 apiece. That's huge. Actually drafted. That tells you he knows how to develop offensive line. I could argue that Russ Aaronfield is the most is the most underrated draft or hiring of the quartet. Because we'll look at the offensive coordinator. We'll look at the former NFL coach who is now the defensive coordinator. We'll look at that. But the offensive line coach might get a shrug, might get barely mentioned. But this is the big deal. I think that if you're looking at the offensive line and you're talking about team building, nothing more important. I would argue the offensive line as a unit is more important than the quarterback. I know it doesn't get the love, but if your offensive line is bad, it don't matter who your quarterback is. And I think that an offensive line can help improve at the college level. An offensive line can help improve a quarterback more than a quarterback can help improve the offensive line. And that's probably true for most quarterbacks in the NFL. But I watched Drew Brees for years be a quick release QB and hide some of the deficiencies of the offensive line. So the quarterback can help the O-line. Let's be very clear. They can help the O-line. But I think in most situations, it's the offensive line benefiting the quarterback. And then Fred Case, this is his third time. He was there in the late 90s. He was there in the late 2000s. Now he's coming back in the mid 2020s. So this is his third time being being a coach at Tennessee State. And it'll be interesting because, like I said, Shannon Harris is already listed as the offensive coordinator. Fred Case was the offensive coordinator with the DC Defenders. I can only imagine, right? I think this is a safe assumption, but I can only imagine that this means we're getting co-offensive coordinators, which is curious to me because that just wasn't the case. That just wasn't the case on the DC Defenders, but maybe that's the route that they want to go this time. And Harris has experience being Reggie Barlow's offensive coordinator. So this will be interesting. Anyway, those are the four hirings that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted. Now, as we push forward, it's Charlotte versus Baltimore. And I like the competition. And I think the CIAA should like the competition. And I want to go through what Charlotte views as the necessary metrics to hit in order to get this tournament back in the Queen City as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan, and we're all about the stats. You know why? Because numbers don't lie. Go check them. When you look at the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear. Wherever you need to go, you can make sure you have the ability to tow it. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with the room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big cruise, big adventures, and even bigger memories. So, doesn't matter if you're looking to explore off-road trails or rolling up to the arena like the MVP, the Armada Pro 4X is. This truck brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Basketball because March Madness is getting tighter and tighter. We're talking about Elite Eight. We're talking about Elite Eight coming up at this point. So make sure you're checking out Locked On College Basketball to stay up to date with the biggest moment in the sport. Now, Charlotte versus Baltimore. That's what it's clearly came down to. If the CIAA does decide to leave Baltimore, it will more than likely be for a chance to play in Charlotte again. I love this competition between Charlotte and Baltimore for the CIAA tournament because to me, it makes the CIAA tournament feel like a bigger deal. I love the fact that Charlotte is going hard for this. I love the fact that Baltimore is campaigning and saying this is where it's supposed to be. This is what we represent. This is what you represent. And look at how they intertwine. I love that these cities are publicly advocating and fighting for this event. And it's a little bit of a war, a little bit of a battle, because to me, that tells you how desirable this event is. That tells you how important that this event is. And I know that there's a lot of benefits for the city as well. It's not just, oh, we want to have this here and we'll do it free of charge. It's not that. But to me, this easily could be relegated or pushed to the wayside. Like that's how I feel about how things could be treated. This is a Division II tournament. And if we're talking about in the sports world, oftentimes D2 tournaments would get pushed to the side. Oftentimes D2 tournaments would not be looked at as a big deal. So to have that treatment, to me, I think is very important. And for the CIAA, you should like it too, because knowing that you have two sides who are publicly going after you. As a CIAA, having two sides publicly announcing how much they desire and how much they're willing to compete for your tournament, that should only drive up the value, right? Because when you have two teams or two cities, it's like, okay, yeah, we want it. But it's like, no, we have two cities who say we need it. That's a completely different situation. And I think that I think the number goes up. In fact, Joe said yesterday's price is not today's price. And I think that's what's happening here, because let's assume neither city is bluffing with how badly they desire to have the tournament. Baltimore wants to keep it, and Charlotte wants to return it to the city. They'll have to compete against each other. And I'm sure that the bids are public. I don't know how the business work exactly, but I would assume they are able to see what each other's bids are. So now the CIAA tournament, they get to pick between the best offer, but the best offers are competing against each other. So it's going to improve, whether that's payouts, whether that's financial rates, as far as fans go, hotel rates, like these things matter. Events, like you'll compete to have the best experience. I think that first year, whether it's renewed in Charlotte, I think that's 2027. So whether it's renewed in Baltimore or if it's moved to Charlotte, that 2027 tournament is going to be something special. That's what I think. I think it's going to be something special. But what does Charlotte feel like they need to do, right? Because they've seen what Baltimore was able to do with the tournament. They've seen how successful that it was. So Charlotte says they want to bring in somebody, and this is the quote from the councilman James Mitchell in Charlotte. Baltimore has figured out one thing we were not able to do, and that's put fans in the game. When you look at the attendance ratings, Baltimore has done a better job. I'm going to stop right there. That, if I were the CIAA, would immediately scare me. I understand that you have a plan, and sometimes in business, you have to take plans without seeing them actually have worked before. Probably one of the reasons I'm not big in business. I'm relatively risk averse. I like to know things. Proof of concept is very important to me. And I don't think that you could prove this concept. I have to trust that you're able to put it in effect. But the fact that I was there for a while and now I'm here and I'm getting much better attendance. I'm getting so many better traits and perks. It would make me hesitant on whether or not I was going to go back. Just gonna be honest with you. It would make me hesitant on whether or not I'd even want to go back. I like it here. I think if I were to CIAA, Charlotte would have to blow my socks off in order for me to say, yeah, I'm going to leave this comfortable spot with a lot of fan interaction, with a lot. Like, they gave me a lot here in Baltimore. And I do agree it's a very black city. I do agree that it's one of the cities that when you think of blackness. Now, I think I was seeing Van Lathan do a top 5 blackest cities, and I swear somebody said Charlotte was on the list. So I don't want to diss Charlotte's ability or Charlotte's black community. I don't want to do that. But what I'll say is Baltimore, when people think about it, they tend to think that. So I do think it aligns with perception and stance of the perception and the actual conference. Perception of the city in conference standing. So I do like that. But anyway, let's continue moving forward for other things. So there's 3 boxes that they're looking for: competitive scholarship opportunities, attractive hotel rates, and exceptional venue experiences. Those are the 3 things. And Mitchell says, I'm confident that if we can check those 3 boxes, we'll have the Spectrum Center ringing for a whole week. I'm confident we can match the scholarship dollars and be very competitive on hotel rates. I think we're going to be smiling in July when the CIAA returns to Charlotte. So I think you can already expect, if you were somebody who went to the CIAA tournament in Charlotte, you can expect to have better hotel rates than you did at that time. Because I'm going to assume that Baltimore has lower hotels than Charlotte based off how Mitchell was talking. And they won't be as low as Baltimore, but they'll be competitive. Scholarship as far as students, incoming students, that'll be there. And then experience, you have to compete. And you've watched Baltimore do it for years. So you've watched kind of a blueprint of what you feel like you can follow and what you think you can exceed. So now you have to come in and be like, all right, cool, we're going to do this, that, and the third. And we're going to and compare it to what's been happening in Baltimore. And in Baltimore is going to be pushed to improve what they have. Excuse me, sorry. They're going to be pushed to improve on what they've already done. This is great for the CIAA. I think that payouts should come out to be better. I think that experience should come out to be better. I think for a fan perspective, you should feel confident that you're going to get a really good show. So all in all, I love this. And it makes it look like an important event. So as we continue pushing, we're going to look at the HBCU coaching exodus, because it's not just players who are leaving. So let's get into that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Sometimes I record episodes a little early and I don't have any energy. And on those moments, I wish that I had a shot of 5-hour energy right here next to my bedside, right here next to my desk. So I could boom, take one and I'd be good. Surge me right through the morning. Because have you ever felt lethargic? If you have, I hope that you had a 5-hour energy next to you and you were able to drink it and you were able to push through. Maybe you up staying late watching the NCAA tournament, trying to just get a busy day. Maybe you just got a lot to do today. 5-hour energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick me up whenever you need it. So listen, the NCAA tournament last game started at 9 o'clock last night. So it pushes. It pushes late, man. Um, Extra daylight. You want to go and do more things. Maybe you want to get a look. You want to hop out the bed. Boom. Take a 5-hour energy shot, turn your swag on, and you ready to get on with the day. So head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, and so many more. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store, and they're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We all focus on the HBCU players entering the transfer portal, but there's a lot of coaches who are leaving as well. We started talking about coaches coming into the HBCU ranks with Reggie Barlow bringing the DC Defenders to Tennessee State. But what about the coaches who are leaving? So you have 3 categories. You have new destinations, you have retirements, and you have resignations. Landon Bussie went to Chicago State from Alcorn, and the Braves have been a consistently competitive team. I think that the Braves have been a team that I don't want to say this, at any moment can turn it on. You know that at any season they can be competitive. They can be a championship contender. And I think that there's power in that. I think there's power in that, or I think there's power in the assumption of what you can be even when you're not that. That speaks volumes. Like, that's how I feel about TSU, and I think that's how most people would feel about TSU. But they've had a couple of down years, and now it's like, oh, okay, maybe they're not. Maybe they're human. But, like, you look at Alcorn, and I know they haven't won the last couple of SWAC championship. They haven't won the SWAC championship, actually, I don't think. But not in the postseason. But you see Bussie always keep Alcorn competitive, always keep them in the mix, always keep them as a team who you feel like can go on a run. Even if they're a 7 seed in the tournament, a 6 seed in the tournament, you feel like they could be a Cinderella squad. I think having that on your resume, having that as the way people look at you is probably the way people talk about you, and that helps when trying to get new jobs. He ended up landing with Chicago State. Then you look at Larry Vickers, who we've talked about at length over this week. He went to Auburn, leaving Norfolk State, and women's basketball side for this one. But I don't know if there's anything to say about Vickers that hasn't been said, but you look at that departure, and I think that's going to end up being the biggest move, of course, because you're going to also lose Kiara Wheeler. And I still wish I would have known if Vickers would have stayed, would Wheeler have stayed? There's a lot of things that are calling her away, a lot of things that are calling her to the portal outside of just your head coach. But it'd been an interesting conversation. And Vickers going to Auburn, it'll be something to watch. He's stepping into the SEC that's trying to find themselves being a basketball powerhouse, both men's and women's. So it's a new game. It's a new game in the SEC. He wanted a challenge, and he's getting that. So I'll be interested to see how. I think that Norfolk State vacancy is the most interesting because you've built up a lot of equity. I think that Norfolk State, you're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding, right? Don't get me wrong. You're going to have to change some things, but it's kind of like Tamika Reed. Yo, this Jackson State job, you see what we built here. People know what we built here. And with a good coach, we can sustain this. That's the way I feel about Norfolk State. Now, retirements, you have guys like Ed Davis. Ed Davis Jr., who is retiring from Morgan State women's basketball, he had a 33-year career. 33-year career, and the last 9 of those seasons were as the head coach of Morgan State. Third winningest coach in women's basketball history for that school, of course. So he's done a lot. And you talking about 33 years. Yeah, it's time to hang it up, man. Like, you done served your time. You done what you needed to do. 9 years in Morgan State may not seem like a lot, but you're looking at a 3-decade career. Over 33 years, you're looking at, you was in the 2020s, the 2000s, 2010s, the 2000s, and the 90s. So there you go. The same could be said for Freda Freeman-Jackson, who 27 years at Bama State. She played there in the 80s. So, like, she's Bama State through and through. She went to the SWAC Hall. She went to the SWAC Hall while she was still coaching. So you're looking at two people who, especially with Freda Jackson, she's been there for 27 years. Ed Davis has been coaching for 33, but he hasn't been at Morgan State for all 33 of those years. You're looking at Freda Freeman-Jackson as 27 years at one university, multiple tournament finals or championships. You're looking at multiple NCAA tournament appearances, a few or one WNIT appearance. She is iconic. She is iconic, and that is we've talked about pillar moves before. As far as losing a pillar, this is losing a pillar. Now, Otis Hughley, he retired or he resigned. I think that he was described to me as being a guy who didn't move the needle. I would agree with that. I think that is an appropriate way to describe Otis Hughley's 3-year tenure at Alabama A&M. I never felt like the Bulldogs were real contenders. I never felt like they were really in the mix. I never felt like I had to be concerned about them. I'm sure over the 3-season run, there was some time when they were in the top 4, 5, I'm sure, because I feel like I mentioned them before. But in general, I don't really remember them. I don't remember Hughley having the impact we thought he would have when he was brought in. He ended up being an okay coach. He ended up just being solid, but they were looking for something that was going to change things. And I don't think that Hughley brought that to you. So his resignation was interesting. I feel like that, they decided to step down or resign. I think there was respect. So it's like, look, we're not going to fire you, but all right, cool. We'll take your walking papers. We ain't going to try to convince you to stay. But anyway, convincing you to stay, I hope it's not hard for me either. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you want to stay along for Monday. So I'll be back over the weekend. We'll see what happens, what's a big time hiring or what's a big time news cycle once Monday rolls around. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.